Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Friday Night Live with myself, Dakir Dawood. Yep, it's a jam-packed schedule for you. We're chatting all things sport. South Africa currently doing wonders at the Olympics. 2 silver medals so far, Tatiana Schoonmaker. And we've obviously got surfers doing the things out there. So it's been quite an interesting week for South African sport. Bafana coming so close to beating France, but then falling just short, and then to going down to Mexico in their final game. But let's chat a bit about Bianca Buitendag. She has claimed South Africa's first silver medal in surfing. The very first time surfing is at the Olympics. And South Africa claims silver. I mean, come on. What more could we ask for? But right now, we're going to the action-packed part of the Olympics, track and field. We've got our hopes in Akani Simbine and Wade van Niekerk that we're hoping can bring some medals back for South Africa. Interesting, but I mean, come on. We're patriotic, we're getting behind our nation, and I hope that you are from home as well. This evening, we've got a jam-packed show for you. It's filled with a lot of interesting topics that's been going down this week. Yes, we're chatting all things sport, but we're chatting about all the aspects around sport as well. As you know, there's the we've got football coming up this weekend. The curtain raiser for the DStv Premiership is this weekend coming up. There's a host of sporting fixtures. But first, before we get into that, Simone Biles, the USA gymnast, she has been the talk of the town building up to this Olympics. Many expected her to win gold effortlessly. And I mean, the US team without her came so close to winning gold. If she was there, gold medal would have probably went to the US. However, she wasn't. And to tell us more about that, we're going to be chatting to Marteleze van Graan, a sports psychologist, and she's going to tell us exactly what went down there. For those of you that haven't been watching the news, the gymnast pulled out of the event moments before competing due to mental health issues. And I think that it's quite important that she wasn't up for it. The fellow athletes backed her and they support her all the way for putting her mental health first. But now we're going to chat to an expert and see what exactly does it take to build up to this point where you'd pull out from an event that you've been training for plus minus 4 years, and when the event is right in front of you, you pull out. Good evening, Marteleze. Thank you so much for joining me on Salam Media. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Good evening, Takir. Thank you for having me.
Marteleze, interesting week of Olympic sport. So there's been some highs and lows for South Africa. But if we touch on some of the gymnastics, and we've got Simone Biles that pulled out of her event moments before going to compete. What does it take to build up to this moment for an athlete?
Yeah, I think it's. I really feel for her to devote 4 years of your life, and in her case, a lot longer than that. I mean, she's the defending champ, the USA and the Russian Olympic Federation. They have a huge rivalry going back years and years. And for her to get to the point where it's so close to compete and she pulls out, she must have been really suffering to get to that point. And it must be a mixed emotions for her at this stage. Really trying to act in her best interest, mental health wise, by pulling out, but also having to deal with the disappointment and obviously the controversy about her pulling out at the last moment. So it's been, I can just imagine that in this build up, things must have derailed quite suddenly somewhere for her to reach that point.
And if you look at it to the build-up of this Olympic Games, athletes have stated mental health issues pulling out of tournaments. Naomi Osaka as well, bringing it up earlier this year. And it's nothing that athletes hide away these days. Athletes take it head on and make it clear that mental health plays an important role in sport. And I mean, do you think we're in 2021 now? Do you think that an athlete like Simone Biles pulls out because she felt it's okay? Whereas in the past, many athletes had other reasons for pulling out, or some of them even took further steps where they didn't pull out, but it had other effects on them?
Mm. Yeah, I think just you mentioned something very important there is just the build up to this Olympics. And if we take the context into consideration, we need to take into account that the Olympics is a year late. So it means that all the preparation, everything had to be readjusted, and the athletes had to adapt quite quickly, which would be could be very it could throw them off in terms of their preparation. They usually like things in a certain structure, so just adjusting to that is quite difficult. Then also the anxiety that I think we all face in the world now, dealing with COVID, not knowing. That also plays a role and comes into play for mental health. But yes, it seems that with the lockdowns and with COVID this year, athletes are really struggling with mental health. More, it's just coming more to the front, and I think within the greater society, that's been the experience that mental health people are really suffering. And to come back to your question about her and feeling comfortable, feeling like she can pull out at this stage, I think I don't think it's that she felt comfortable to pull out. I think it was just a case that I don't think she arrived at this decision easily. I think she must have been very conflicted to get to a point where she felt that she's going to pull out of it. And yes, I think there's now in 2021, there's a lot more support and a lot more understanding about mental health. If you think about the previous Olympics with Michael Phelps sharing his battle with depression. So more and more athletes are speaking up about it, and I have tremendous respect for it, because we tend to think athletes are invincible and that they don't deal with the everyday stresses and insecurities that we as the average Joe do.
What are some of the trends that you've picked up over time, because you are in a professional sports setup? At the University of Pretoria, and you deal with athletes on a daily basis, and just looking over the past year or two, keeping in mind the effect of COVID and also competitions, tournaments that's been shifted around. Many athletes build their lives and their livelihood around the sport that they compete in. And what are some of the trends with regards to mental health that you're picking up in athletes over the past year?
Yeah, so it's been quite saddening for me to see how athletes have struggled on an emotional level, on a financial level, it's on a physical level. It's been tremendous. If you think about the lockdown in South Africa, many of our Olympic athletes couldn't train for a certain amount of time, and the uncertainty with when they would compete, the goalposts just kept shifting. And it really required athletes to be very flexible in their approach, and to, instead of focusing on with motivation, we call it the internal motivation or external motivation. So internal motivation is my beliefs, my values, things that drive me from within to be successful. External motivation is status, money, being number one, and things like that. And many athletes had to shift that focus from being externally motivated much more to being internally motivated, or a mix of the two, in order to stay motivated and staying committed to the training. Because of course there's a lot of disappointment in this last year with sport events being cancelled. Also being able to compete but without spectators, the impact that has. So it's been usually being at the top of your game as an athlete is a very lonely road, but I think COVID just heightened that. And now also having to isolate for 2 weeks, or if family members are ill, not being able to see them, and then financially losing out on sponsorships, or having to extend another year of their lives studying, or whatever the case might be. It's really taken its toll on athletes, and it's been hard. It's really tested their resilience, and it's gone with a lot of disappointment and anger.
I can imagine. I mean, an athlete's lifespan, or let's say their career span, is just so short, and if they don't make the most out of that 5-6 years, for many others we could say 11-12 years out of that career of theirs, it's just going to be a downward spiral from there, because how many athletes have been not seen in the past? I'm talking of gold medalists, Springbok players, Bafana players. The moment their career in sport is done, they become just an average Joe and a normal person in society, and they don't have anything to fall back on. Your job as a sports psychologist, how have you approached things now with COVID, and have you been busier since everybody's come back? Sport is somewhat back to normal. Have you been busier, and what has your approach been to treating athletes in the sporting fraternity?
Yeah, so as you say, a lot of the athletes, especially our elite athletes, a big part of who they are, their identity is built around sport. And suddenly, if that's taken away, it's like the rug is pulled from underneath their feet. And it creates a lot of uncertainty and anxiety about who am I and what do I do. If you think about our rowers, they train maybe 4 to 6 hours a day, and now suddenly you've got 4 to 6 extra hours a day. What do you do? Even for our other athletes who train 4 hours a day, suddenly that's gone. You used to travel. You used to not being at home for long periods of time because you're on the road traveling, and now suddenly you're at home. How to deal with that? So it's been quite a unique challenge, quite unique challenges for the athletes. From my side, yes, it's definitely picked up a bit more since sport has opened up. It ebbs and it flows, sport, because it's season based, and off seasons it tends to fluctuate. But yeah, it's definitely getting a lot busier. I think in terms of school sport, it's been hard because for many of the school sport athletes, doing a sport is a way to escape, is a way to make school bearable, and suddenly that's also gone. So a lot of people, a lot of athletes really feeling down and depressed. Even people preparing for comrades, now 2 years in a row, no comrades. It's a shock to the system. So from my side, how I approach it, I work from a person-centered stance. So I meet the athlete on the level that they are and what they need in that moment. There's no blueprint. Every athlete gets their own game plan on how to assist them to deal with the challenges that they face, because no athlete, the challenges vary depending on the athlete.
Understandable. And looking at it, do you think that it's more tougher for an athlete in an individual sport, such as athletics, for example, and in this case, gymnastics, compared to athletes in a team environment, such as your Bafanas and your Sevens team that competed at the Olympics now?
Sure, you're really putting me on the spot. It's a difficult one to call, because with an individual sport, even though it's an individual event, usually the support staff play a vital role, and the training squad play a vital role. And of course, the athlete will miss out on that. And even with Simone Biles pulling out, she had the support of her teammates, but one wouldn't necessarily associate teammates with an individual sport like gymnastics. So it's difficult in a sense that individual athletes are used to training on their own and being a bit more on their own at times. Whereas with your team sports, it's really I've experienced a lot of the players missing their mates, missing the banter before time, missing being able to just mess around and also to interact and play and sit and video analyze games together. So yeah, I think COVID has also shown us it's always been there, but I think it's just pointed it out more that there's a big social element to sport for athletes and a sense of belonging. On individual sports, maybe a bit more for team sports, but it plays a vital role because it is the biggest part of where an athlete spend their time is either on the track or in the gymnastics studio or on the field with fellow players.
The reason for my question was because if you look at it in rugby, for example, if you miss a tackle 10 meters before the try line, one of your teammates could possibly save you.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
right, individual sport, let's say Simone Biles messes up a movement.
Mhm.
It's just her and her head. There's nobody to give her a pat on the back and tell her everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You're going to be fine.
Mm.
That's the aspects that we get into and we're getting into. And how much of an effect does that have on the mental aspect of the player or of the athlete to bounce back and still bring the A game?
Yeah, of course, that's what you raise is very valid. That if it's an individual-based sport, if you make a mistake, it's on you. And of course, it's in that moment. It's about being task-focused and focused on what can I do next, and pushing that trying to push that away as far as possible to focus on what needs to happen next, so that you can recover from it. With team sports, yes, you have that support in the here and now, that someone can pat you on the back. But I can tell you that even if it's 10 meters before the try line and you miss a tackle, even if your teammate makes the tackle, you will still beat yourself up on it. So the mental preparation for every athlete will be different, depending on the needs of the sport and the demands of the sport. For someone like Simone Biles, it's possible that she doesn't even register when she makes an error, because she's so when she executes it, she's in that state of flow where everything just happens and it occurs naturally. So she will only see it on the video afterwards. Whereas with a tackle, the player might also be so in the zone that in that moment he doesn't realize his fullback actually came to make a beautiful cross tackle. But afterwards in the video analysis, it might be pointed out to him, or in the media, someone might ask something, or on Twitter, and it could be pointed out to him.
I'm so glad you brought up the Blue app. We've seen Rassie Ratsmith has been on that app quite a bit this week, and many has been asking so many questions.
Yeah.
This generation, this Olympic Games is quite different. Athletes have been active on TikTok. It's nice because from a fan and from a media perspective, we get to see what it's like in the Olympic Village.
Yeah.
And I'm sure many people feel the same. With the positive comes the negative.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you deal with your name trending on social media and couch coaches and couch spectators telling you how to do your job? How does that affect the athlete?
Yeah, the impact of social media on an athlete's mental well-being has been tremendous, and it's actually been in many cases to their detriment. I love what you mentioned in terms of the pros of social media, being allowed almost a backstage ticket to the athletes' lives and seeing what it's all about. But the negative side of it is the constant critique, that social media is 24/7. Trending happens quite quickly, and before you know it, something that you said is taken out of context and it's blown completely out of proportion. So for many of the elite athletes, we actually have a social media strategy. So their PR person would be, and the coach and the support staff would be involved in deciding how to actually deal with this going forward. So you might have heard that with Tatiana, they decided that she will have limited interaction with the media. And as she's raced, she's actually engaged a bit more with Naomi Osaka with the French Open. She said, "No, I'm not going to engage with the media," and that had a different impact, and again caused a lot of controversy, because it challenges the way we think about engaging with the media. So yeah, it's difficult for the athletes, and usually the thing is that my advice to the athlete is to use social media to their advantage. That if you are going to post something, what is the goal of it? What is it that you wish to achieve with this? And is this going to add value to what you are, this journey that you are on, or not? And then to take it further, because the athletes obviously in the Olympic Village is a bit bored, because they need to be careful of COVID. So that also means that they could put things on social media that, looking back, it's a it's a 50-50 call.
Mm. It's an interesting one that you brought up. And let's look at our South African team. For example, we've got Caitlin Rooskrans, we've got Naveen Daris, our gymnasts that are still teenagers.
Yes. Yeah.
And how do we stop teenagers from being teenagers and try to implement such good strategies that can benefit them? How do we implement it in their lifestyle?
Yeah, of course, with teenagers, we're talking of a completely different approach, above and beyond the fact that they are at the top of their game, an elite athlete. And I think that's where the coach and the support staff, parents, play a very important role in guiding the athlete or the gymnast in what it is that they share. And also to remind them that your social media presence, it builds up a record, and it's there forever. And to be a bit more mindful of what they share and when they share, and to just point out the consequences to them. One cannot keep them away from social media. That's simply not realistic. It would actually do them a disservice, but it's empowering them and providing them with the psychoeducation to make sure that when they do post or when they do share, that it will add value, and giving them the tools and the skills to deal with the possible backlash, or even the attention that the post will receive, because it can be quite overwhelming if last week no one knew who you are, and suddenly the whole of South Africa is cheering for you, and you've gone from 10 followers, I'm exaggerating now, 10 followers to 20,000 in a matter of days. So also assisting them in dealing with that, so that they keep themselves grounded and focused on the task at hand.
I'm just wondering here, and from a professional aspect, I know that you've given us so much insight into your industry on the show, but from a professional aspect, is there a seriousness from coaches looking at all of these different aspects? Have they come to you in the build up to this Olympics to look at all of these aspects that can make the athlete or assist the athlete perform at their optimal performance at the Olympics?
I think I'm quite at Tux at Semley and the High Performance Center where I work. I'm very fortunate to work with coaches who are open-minded and really put the best interest of the athletes first, and that go above and beyond in terms of assisting the athlete and really giving the athlete the best possible chance of success in the Olympics, and providing support on a multidisciplinary level, be that rehab from a biokineticist, physio sessions, nutritionist sessions, doctor appointments, sessions with a psychologist. So it's really, it takes a village. And I'm fortunate to work in a context where there's buy-in from everyone, and everyone's geared towards making sure the athlete is looked after on all levels.
No, definitely.
There is still a stigma, I think, surrounding mental health, and that mental health for athletes is something that's important. I think, in my opinion, in the last couple of years, athletes, by speaking out about it, have made it, has just reiterated the importance of looking after our athletes and looking at the entire picture, and not just the performance part of it.
No, definitely. I like the way that you brought it up and saying that in your space, coaches are open-minded, and I hope that rubs off across the entire country, where coaches can look at this aspect of the game and understand that it takes more than just on the pitch and what you put into your body in order for you to perform at your peak. Marteleze, that's all we have time for tonight. Unfortunately, I love this interview. Thank you so much for chatting to me this evening. You've made the general public and myself understand so much more about mental health and what it takes for an athlete to perform at their peak in a major event like the Olympics.
No, I enjoyed chatting to you. It feels like we can go for hours. And yeah, I've enjoyed speaking to you, and I look forward to seeing how our two swimmers do tomorrow. Our men's hockey have caused a bit of an upset. I look forward to the rest of the Olympics, and I hope you do too.
Most definitely. Interesting times for Team South Africa. But Marteleze, thank you so much. Have a great evening further, and have a lekker weekend. Enjoy the
Yeah.
rugby on offer and the athletics.
Yes, definitely. You too. Thanks. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. That was Marteleze van Graan, the sports psychologist at Tux University, giving us a bit of an insight on what it takes to get an athlete mentally prepared, and just analyzing the Simone Biles incident that happened earlier this week, where she pulled out moments before she was supposed to participate in the gymnastics team event at the Tokyo Olympics. But yep, that's our first segment wrapped up. Next up, we're going to be chatting to Roger Haitengi. He's going to give us an update on what's happening in the Olympics and what we can expect from Team South Africa in the track and field events that's going to be taking place over the weekend. Stay tuned. Don't move.